The autumn air in Boston was gradually taking on winter's chill. Elizabeth Harrison gazed out the window of her design office in Old Town while sketching a baby room for her niece or nephew. As her pencil glided over the paper, her mind drifted to the child she had lost several months ago. "Elizabeth, there's a client on the phone," her assistant Kate peeked through the office door. Elizabeth took a deep breath, put on a smile, and closed her sketchbook. She was a highly regarded interior designer in Boston, especially known for her restoration of old buildings. Business was going well, and she had recently been featured on a magazine cover. "Thanks, Kate. Could you put them through?" After ending the call, Elizabeth's cell phone rang. The screen displayed "Mom." She hesitated for a moment before answering. "Mom, what is it?" "Elizabeth, you haven't forgotten about dinner tonight, have you?" Martha Harrison's voice carried a slight tone of reproach. "It's Rebecca's pregnancy celebration. Your father has picked out a special wine." Elizabeth closed her eyes. "I haven't forgotten. I'll be there at 7. "Good, and could you help with the decorations for Rebecca's baby shower? You're good at that sort of thing, aren't you? We're holding it next Saturday at the Golden Garden." "Mom, my work." "Don't worry, I've checked your schedule. I asked Daniel. He said you're free." Elizabeth sighed. She felt slightly irritated that her husband had leaked information to her parents, but Daniel was probably just being polite in answering their questions. He was still trying to understand the complex relationship she had with her family. "All right. I'll help." That evening, Elizabeth and her husband headed to her parents' home. Daniel Harrison glanced at his wife while driving. "Are you okay? You don't have to push yourself today." Elizabeth smiled. "I'm fine. This is my family." Daniel nodded silently. He loved his wife and understood her complicated relationship with her family. However, he couldn't help feeling that her parents had been too cold since her miscarriage.
Can you imagine making $10,000 a month just from YouTube, all from home? That's exactly what I did with Reddit Stories. No face, no voice. Check the link in the description if you're curious.
When they arrived at the Harrison mansion, the front door opened, and Rebecca came out to greet them. Her belly wasn't showing much yet, but her face had that special glow of pregnancy. "Elizabeth. Daniel. You finally made it." Rebecca hugged Elizabeth and kissed Daniel. "Everyone's waiting." In the living room, John Harrison and Martha were seated. John stood up with a whiskey in hand and shook hands with his son-in-law. "Daniel, how's work? Did you wrap up that case?" Martha kissed Elizabeth's cheek. "Dear, have you lost weight? You need to eat more," she said, touching her daughter's arm. "You need to forget about the miscarriage and move forward." Elizabeth maintained her smile while feeling pain inside. Her family treated her miscarriage as if it were a trivial event. Her doctor had told her, "Your poor physical condition is probably due to mental stress," and her family kept repeating, "You're overthinking it." "Rebecca, how's your morning sickness?" Elizabeth tried to change the subject. "I hardly have any. The doctor said, it's a healthy pregnancy." Rebecca smiled proudly. "Mom always said this about me since I was little, didn't she?" Rebecca can handle anything with ease. John smiled proudly. "That's right. She's the star of our family." During dinner, the conversation revolved around Rebecca's pregnancy, her husband Michael's success, and the coming baby. Elizabeth ate quietly, occasionally nodding to participate in the conversation. Under the table, Daniel held her hand, offering silent support. After dinner, Martha called Elizabeth into the kitchen. "About the baby shower. I've made a gift list," she handed her a tablet. "And I have some decoration ideas too. Please take care of it." Though reluctant inside, Elizabeth smiled and nodded. "Leave it to me, Mom." On the drive home, Daniel said quietly, "You can keep your distance. You don't need to force yourself. Their family. If I don't help, who will? Elizabeth replied, gazing out the window. The next day, Elizabeth received a call from her Aunt Helen. Helen Watson, Daniel's paternal aunt, lived far away in Chicago but occasionally visited Boston. Elizabeth, I'm coming to Boston this weekend. Could we meet? Helen. Of course. Please stay with us. Elizabeth was genuinely happy. Helen was like true family to her. Then I'll arrive Friday. I'm looking forward to hearing about your new projects. After hanging up, Elizabeth felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. Having Helen visit would give her some support before the baby shower. That night, lying in bed, Elizabeth told Daniel, Helen is coming. I can tell her everything. Daniel gently touched his wife's hair. That's good. Blood ties aren't the only thing that makes a family, Liz. Elizabeth rested her head on her husband's chest. I know. But still. She cut off her words. There was much she wanted to say, but she didn't yet have the courage to voice it. The day before the baby shower, Elizabeth was shopping at Exeter Market downtown. She was selecting a gift for Rebecca, though it was hard to find something heartfelt. She was torn between wanting to sincerely celebrate her future niece or nephew and her own sense of loss. Elizabeth. Turning around, she saw Michael Foster, Rebecca's husband. He had several shopping bags on his arm. Hello, Michael, Elizabeth smiled. Michael approached her and lowered his voice. About tomorrow, are you okay? His question surprised Elizabeth. He was the only one in the family who considered her feelings. Yes, of course, she answered automatically, but seeing the sincerity in his eyes, she let a bit of truth slip. No, honestly, it's not easy. Michael nodded understandingly. I get it. Rebecca and your parents. He hesitated for a moment as if choosing his words. Sometimes they can be insensitive to others' feelings. Thank you, Michael, Elizabeth said with genuine gratitude. It helps just knowing you care. If you need anything, you can tell me, Michael said before parting. When she returned home, Daniel was in the living room with his laptop open. He looked up from the screen with a slightly confused expression. Have you seen Rebecca's Instagram? Elizabeth shook her head. She posted. Daniel turned the laptop to show her. I have a special surprise for tomorrow, everyone, look forward to it. I've prepared something especially for a certain person. A wave of anxiety swept through Elizabeth. What could that be? I don't know, but I have a bad feeling, Daniel said honestly. Elizabeth took a deep breath. It's probably something about the pregnancy. Maybe a gender reveal. Maybe. Daniel didn't seem convinced but said nothing more. In the evening, Helen arrived. Despite the long journey from Chicago, she was full of energy. At 60, Helen had short graying hair and intelligent blue eyes, and was known for her straightforward manner. Elizabeth, you've lost weight, Helen said, hugging her nephew's wife tightly. Are you all right? Yes, I'm just busy, Elizabeth answered, but Helen's sharp eyes didn't miss her fatigue. After dinner, while Daniel was cleaning up, Helen and Elizabeth went out to the patio. Under the starry sky, Helen tilted her wine glass and asked. Tell me the truth. How did your family respond, especially after the miscarriage? Elizabeth was a bit startled. Why? Daniel told me a little. He's worried. After a long silence, Elizabeth finally spoke. They don't care. For Mom and Dad, only Rebecca's pregnancy matters. Her voice was tinged with pain. The day after my miscarriage, Mom called and said, try again soon. As if what I lost was a pet or something. Anger flashed across Helen's face. That's terrible. But their family, Elizabeth said as if making an excuse. Because they're family, they should cherish your feelings more, Helen said firmly. Blood ties alone don't make a family. Love and respect create a family. Tears welled up in Elizabeth's eyes. I know, but don't you think it's strange? Why are they so cold when they're supposed to be family? Helen's question left Elizabeth silent. From inside the house, they heard Daniel's phone ring. After a while, he came out to the patio. His expression showed clear concern. That was Rebecca, he said quietly. She says she's prepared a special presentation for tomorrow. I asked several times, but she wouldn't tell me what it was. Elizabeth's anxiety increased. I wonder what she's planning. That night, Elizabeth was plagued by nightmares. In her dream, she was surrounded by many people, but no one would listen to her. Rebecca approached, smiling. Behind that smile lurked something cruel. Liz, Daniel's voice woke her. Are you okay? You were screaming. Elizabeth wiped her sweat-drenched forehead. I had a scary dream. What was it about? I don't remember, she lied. In fact, she remembered it vividly, but she was afraid that voicing it would make it real. During breakfast, Helen looked worriedly at Elizabeth's complexion. You didn't sleep well. Elizabeth smiled weakly. I'm fine. You don't have to go to the party today, Helen suggested. You could say you're not feeling well. Elizabeth shook her head. Then I'd be criticized even more. Elizabeth only thinks about herself. That's their problem, not yours, Helen said. I'm going, Elizabeth was determined. But I promise to leave immediately if anything happens. Daniel and Helen exchanged glances and nodded. We'll be right by your side, Daniel held his wife's hand. The three of them began to prepare. Elizabeth put on a pale blue dress and picked up the gift bag. On the surface, she was ready to play the role of the perfect sister. But inside, a storm was brewing. Before getting into the car, Helen grabbed her arm. Remember. There are people who love the real you. Elizabeth's heart filled with gratitude. The Golden Garden was one of Boston's most prestigious restaurants. It was a 19th-century mansion that had been modernized while preserving its historic character, with an elegant banquet hall with a high ceiling on the second floor. Upon arriving at the restaurant, Elizabeth hesitated for a moment. Though she had been involved in the restaurant's design, she couldn't feel proud of it today. Liz, are you okay? Daniel placed his hand on her arm. Yes, Elizabeth took a deep breath. Let's go. The second-floor banquet hall was decorated with pink and blue balloons. About 20 relatives and friends had already arrived, enjoying appetizers or surrounding the pregnant Rebecca in conversation. As Elizabeth, Daniel, and Helen entered, Martha hurried over. You finally made it, Martha's voice was sweet, but her eyes had a stinging light. Rebecca's been waiting. And Helen, it's been a while. Yes, Martha, Helen replied calmly. You look well. Martha turned away as if ignoring Helen and grabbed Elizabeth's arm. Come, let's go greet Rebecca. Rebecca was in the center of the room. Her husband Michael stood beside her, his expression subtly tense. Rebecca, dressed in an elegant maternity dress, flashed an exaggerated smile when she saw Elizabeth. Big sister. You came. Rebecca hugged Elizabeth. The embrace felt stiff, somehow calculated. Congratulations, Rebecca, Elizabeth said gently. It's a lovely party. Oh, this is all thanks to you, Rebecca replied in a saccharine voice. The decorations are perfect, and this restaurant is wonderful. John Harrison approached his daughters. My beautiful daughters, he said, but his gaze was directed only at Rebecca. Elizabeth, the gift table is over there, he pointed. It's a special day, let's enjoy it. Elizabeth smiled and went to place her gift. Daniel and Helen kept an eye on her while beginning conversations with other guests. As time passed, Elizabeth began to relax slightly. Martha asked her to help with the food, and she moved back and forth between the kitchen and the hall. "May I have your attention, please?" A sudden silence fell, and Elizabeth emerged from the kitchen. Rebecca was holding a microphone, standing in the center of the room. It was time to open the gifts. "First, I'd like to thank everyone for coming today," Rebecca said with a radiant smile. "And I have a special announcement." The venue fell silent. Elizabeth noticed the tension that crossed Michael's face. "Actually, today we have two celebrations," Rebecca continued. "The first, of course, is our baby. And the second is..." She paused for a moment and looked directly at Elizabeth. There was a cruel joy in her eyes. "We're also celebrating my sister Elizabeth's miscarriage. She's finally given up." The venue froze. No one laughed, just stood frozen in shock and horror. Michael's face paled, and he grabbed his wife's arm. "Rebecca." Elizabeth couldn't believe her ears. Her legs trembled, and she felt a tightness in her chest. The world seemed to be moving in slow motion. "Rebecca, that's..." Daniel began in a voice shaking with anger. "It's a joke, a joke," Rebecca said, laughing. "Everyone, don't look so serious. Elizabeth is fine, right?" Elizabeth stood up on trembling legs. "That's sick, Rebecca." Her voice was quiet but resonated throughout the venue. "Celebrating someone's grief." Suddenly, her hair was pulled hard. Martha stood behind her, grabbing her hair. "Don't overreact to something like this," Martha said in an angry voice. "Can't you take a joke? You're always like this, ruining your sister's happy day." "Martha!" Helen rushed over. "Let go of her. This has nothing to do with you," Martha shouted. John stood between his daughters. "Elizabeth, you always overreact. Rebecca just made a slightly inappropriate joke. She didn't intentionally try to hurt you." "Not intentional," Elizabeth said with tears in her eyes. "She said she was celebrating the death of my baby." "You're making too much of it," Martha snorted. "It was just a miscarriage. You can have another one soon." Something broke inside Elizabeth. She tried to escape from Martha's grasp, but Martha pulled her hair even harder. The two struggled and, without realizing it, moved closer to the banister of the mezzanine. "Let go," Elizabeth cried. "You should apologize to your sister." Martha raised her voice. In the confusion, Daniel and Helen tried to rush to Elizabeth's aid. Michael was also trying to get between the two women. In the next moment, it was clear to everyone watching. Martha pushed Elizabeth hard toward the banister. Elizabeth lost her balance and fell over the railing into the open space. "Elizabeth!" Daniel's scream echoed. He reached out for her, but his fingertips barely missed. As Elizabeth fell, she saw the surprised and fearful faces of Rebecca and her parents. They seemed to understand the consequences of their actions only now. During the fall, a strange peace came over Elizabeth. The thought, this might be the end, crossed her mind. She heard the screams of restaurant patrons on the first floor, and the next moment, Elizabeth collided with the hard marble floor. Sharp pain shot through her body, and then consciousness began to fade. The last thing she saw was the beautiful ceiling mural of the restaurant. The one she had designed herself. How ironic. The moment she thought this, the world was enveloped in darkness. A white ceiling and the smell of disinfectant. These were the first things Elizabeth felt when she regained consciousness. She blinked, trying to focus her eyes. "Liz? Liz, can you hear me?" It was Daniel's voice. His face came into her blurry vision. A worried, tired face, but with a color of relief in his eyes. "Daniel." Her voice was hoarse. "Where?" "At the hospital. You're going to be fine now." Elizabeth could gradually see her surroundings. A white hospital room. And 4 drip. And 2 other figures by the window. Helen and a stranger. A man in uniform. A police officer. Elizabeth was confused. Memories came back in fragments. The baby shower. Rebecca's words. The struggle with Martha. And the fall. What happened? Miss Harrison, the police officer approached. How are you feeling? It hurts, but I'm okay, Elizabeth answered. And you are? Detective Martin. I'd like to talk to you about your accident. Accident? Elizabeth, Helen came to her bedside and took her hand. You fell from the 2nd floor. But miraculously, you escaped serious injury. According to the doctor, you have a mild concussion, a broken right arm, and bruises on your back. I remember. Elizabeth searched for words. Rebecca said, terrible things, and then Mom and Michael Foster called it in, Detective Martin said calmly. According to his testimony, this wasn't just an accident. Michael? Elizabeth was surprised. The door opened, and another person entered. An intelligent-looking black woman in a suit. Elizabeth, I'm glad you're awake, she smiled as she approached. I'm Carol Watson. I was introduced by your colleague Sarah Jenkins and will be serving as your attorney. Attorney? Elizabeth was increasingly confused. Michael told everything, Helen said quietly. Not just what happened at the baby shower. He had been questioning Rebecca and your parents' behavior for months. What do you mean? Daniel, Helen, and Carol exchanged glances. Detective Martin cleared his throat. Miss Harrison, this is going to be shocking, the detective said carefully. Your sister and parents are currently being questioned. They're suspected of causing you bodily harm. Harm? It's clear that this wasn't just a fall accident, the detective continued. But that's not all. According to Michael Foster's testimony and the evidence he submitted, your family is suspected of intentionally administering drugs to you during your pregnancy. Elizabeth gasped. That can't be. What Foster submitted were text messages left on Rebecca's smartphone and pharmacy receipts, the detective continued. Also, the drugs in question were found at your parents' home. They're currently being analyzed in a laboratory. Elizabeth's heart raced. My miscarriage, they did it. Her voice was trembling. Carol stepped forward. Elizabeth, listen. At this stage, it's just speculation. But the evidence suggests, your family didn't want you to have children. Elizabeth's world seemed to be crumbling. Why? According to Michael, Helen said gently, your parents always saw Rebecca as the heir. They thought Rebecca should have the first child, producing the true next generation of the Montgomery family. But I took the Harrison name. Elizabeth said weakly. That might have been the problem, Daniel said quietly. You're not carrying on their family name. That's not all, Carol interjected. According to Michael, Rebecca has always been jealous of you. Your success, your marriage, and the fact that you got pregnant first. She's not that kind of. Elizabeth began, but she wasn't confident in her words. She was pathologically jealous of you, Detective Martin said. Numerous messages criticizing your success have been found on her smartphone. The frequency increased after your pregnancy announcement. We also have testimony from her friends, Carol said. Rebecca reportedly said she absolutely could not forgive your pregnancy. Elizabeth covered her face with trembling hands. Tears streamed down her cheeks. I can't believe it, their family. Daniel embraced his wife's shoulders. Let's stay away from them from now on. Your real family is here. What about Michael? Elizabeth suddenly asked, remembering. He's in the waiting room, Helen answered. He wants to see you, but he said to let him know when you're ready. Elizabeth nodded. I want to see him. When Michael entered the room, his face was etched with guilt and sadness. Elizabeth, I'm so sorry, he said in a trembling voice. I should have realized sooner. It's not your fault, Elizabeth answered quietly. I should have noticed, Michael repeated. Rebecca started changing after you announced your pregnancy. She spent hours on the phone with her parents every night. And he stumbled over his words. Every time she visited your house, she always stopped by the kitchen, saying she would make tea or coffee. Elizabeth shuddered. She couldn't believe that such a terrible intention had been hidden behind her seemingly kind sister's smile. But why now? Elizabeth asked. Because she got pregnant, Michael answered. She thought she won. And to make her victory perfect. The surprise at the baby shower, Daniel said bitterly. I'm sorry, I'm really sorry, Michael repeated. Elizabeth took a deep breath. Her heart felt intense pain and, at the same time, a strange sense of release. Everything made sense now, the unnatural feeling she'd had about her family for years, their strange attitudes. You did the right thing, Michael, she said quietly. You acted like real family. A heavy silence filled the room. Elizabeth lay in bed, thinking about her life ahead. Around her were people who truly loved her and wished for her happiness. And her blood family had tried to hurt her. What do we do now? She asked weakly. First, focus on recovery, Daniel squeezed her hand. Then, we'll proceed with the necessary legal steps. Carol will fully support us. Carol nodded. I will protect you from your family. I promise. True family, Elizabeth said quietly. I finally understand what that means. Spring sunlight streamed onto the kitchen table. Elizabeth was drinking tea, reflecting on the events of a year ago. Since being discharged from the hospital, she had been spending more time with Daniel's family. She especially talked with Helen on the phone several times a week, and either Helen visited Boston or Elizabeth and Daniel went to Chicago once a month. What are you thinking about? Daniel entered the kitchen. Just, various things, Elizabeth smiled. About the trial too. Rebecca and her parents' trial had ended 3 months ago. For Elizabeth, standing on the witness stand and facing them was one of the most difficult experiences of her life. In court, Rebecca cried and claimed it was all a joke, but the evidence was irrefutable. Michael's testimony was decisive. He detailed the actions of his wife and in-laws, submitting records of their messages and evidence of drug purchases. Michael stated that it was not an appropriate environment to raise a child, and had already initiated divorce proceedings. The court sentenced Rebecca to 4 years and each parent to 5 years in prison. Rebecca gave birth in prison, and the child was temporarily placed under state protection. I heard from Michael, Elizabeth told Daniel. He's decided to raise the child alone. Daniel sat next to his wife. I'm surprised. But I think he'll be fine. Me too, Elizabeth nodded. We'll support him too. The child is innocent. The doorbell rang, and Elizabeth stood up. When she opened the door, Helen was standing there. Behind her was an unfamiliar girl. Elizabeth, Helen smiled brightly. I'd like to introduce Sophia. She's a child who wants to talk to you. Sophia, a girl of about 12, looked up at Elizabeth with a slightly nervous expression. Nice to meet you, Mrs. Harrison. Elizabeth wondered but invited them in. In the living room, Helen explained. Sophia is the daughter of an acquaintance of mine. Unfortunately, her mother passed away in an accident last month. She has no other relatives. You're looking for foster parents, Elizabeth said quietly. She and Daniel had recently begun discussing adoption. Since her miscarriage, doctors had told her that natural pregnancy might be difficult, but that wasn't a reason for them to give up on having a family. I heard from Helen, Sophia said, gathering her courage. That you're kind people. And, she continued hesitantly, family doesn't have to be blood-related, right? Tears welled up in Elizabeth's eyes. She took Sophia's hand. That's right. True family is connected by love and respect. That night, Elizabeth and Daniel lay in bed, discussing the day's events. What do you think about Sophia? Daniel asked. She's a lovely child, Elizabeth answered. Of course, this is a big decision, but let's take our time to think about it. Daniel held his wife's hand. But I'm thinking positively. Elizabeth nodded. Looking up at the starry sky visible through the window, she reflected. A year ago, she had been betrayed by her blood family, but now she was surrounded by a real family bound by new ties. Rebecca and her parents would move to another state after their release. They seemed to continue blaming Elizabeth, but they would no longer be involved in her life. True family, Elizabeth whispered. I'm sure we can become a wonderful family. Daniel embraced his wife. Outside, the spring breeze gently stirred the trees, heralding a new beginning.